So if you're getting into hammock camping and starting to do some research on what all it takes, what kind of equipment and everything, you could really get overwhelmed with the prices of everything. A nice hammock's going to be expensive, and then you start looking into stuff like top quilts and under quilts and all that kind of stuff. The prices can go way up, because like you could spend $120 to $300 or more for the top quilt, and then another, you know, $120, $150 to $300 for the under quilt. Stuff can get really expensive really quick, and a lot of people can end up being discouraged by that and just decide not to do it. So my suggestion is like what I did when I first got started in it. A lot of people going into hammock camping, they've already been camping, they already have a lot of equipment that themselves, so just use that when you initially start out. And matter of fact, I've been doing this for a few years now, and I still use my old camping equipment. I have, like, for example, my sleeping bag. I have a sleeping bag that works great. I got this one for 3 seasons, then I got a winter bag too. So I just can't justify the cost to buy a top quilt, and it's just not worth it to me when the stuff I have, it works fine. So let me show you how you can use your normal sleeping bag for a top quilt. Okay, so a top quilt, you know, it basically looks like this on the top, and then if you flip it upside down, a top quilt looks like this on the bottom. It's got, in a lot of cases, it has a sewn in foot box that's like from here to here, and so first of all, let me say, a top quilt doesn't have zippers on it, and a top quilt doesn't have as much material as a sleeping bag because it doesn't have to go all the way around you. So it's lighter because it has less material, and it doesn't have zippers and everything. So that's an advantage of a top quilt. But to me, the few ounces that it's going to save is just not worth the price. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. But basically, you take away the zippers, and this is what a top quilt looks like. This foot box is sewn in and everything, and you don't have, like on my sleeping bag, it's got this hood here. So that's extra material too. Make sure you can see that. Yeah, it's got that hood there. So a top quilt wouldn't have that, and that saves a few ounces too. The advantage to a top quilt versus a sleeping bag is when you're laying in a hammock, it's really hard to get in a sleeping bag, to get the sleeping bag material underneath you, and then about over the top of you, and get it all situated while you're rocking around in the hammock and then trying to zip it all up. It's a really pain. The nice thing about top quilts with these little foot boxes and everything is you get in the hammock and get all comfortable, and then when you get ready to, when you're laying there in your hammock all comfortable, and you just grab your top quilt, put your feet down inside the foot box, and then pull this over the top of you, and you're good to go. This all hangs loose. There's nothing underneath you. That's what your under quilt is for, to keep the bottom part of you warm. But this just lays loose on you, and it's comfortable. You're not like in this mummy bag. If it was all zipped up, you'd be all tight and constricted. But now I just got from like right below my knees down is zipped up in that foot box, and everything else is open, and it works perfect. It's what a top quilt does. So I just zip up my sleeping bag to about below my knees and use it for a top quilt. Now I didn't have to buy anything. I didn't have to spend $300 for a top quilt. So that's my suggestion for somebody getting into hammocks that's already been camping, already has a sleeping bag and everything, and wants to stay on a budget when they're buying a gear, especially something they're just getting into and they don't know if they're going to like. So just take your sleeping bag, just zip it up to about below your knees, and it works perfect. There's no difference in this and a top quilt except for a few ounces, and you don't have this little hood material on there. So that's what I would suggest. Now if you have one of those rectangle shaped bags, this is a mummy bag, it's tapered. The rectangle shaped bags, especially if you're using a hammock that doesn't have a bug net on it, it tends to, what I've seen is that extra material down at the foot, it tends to sometime during the night get thrown over the edge of the hammock, and then that weight is just constantly pulling down on your sleeping bag throughout the night and everything. So that's kind of an aggravation. And you could buy a mummy bag really cheap. If you have one of the rectangle shaped sleeping bags, I would definitely suggest switching and going with a mummy bag. And like I said, you could buy one at Walmart or wherever, you know, if you're trying to stay on a budget and everything. So that's my suggestion with the a budget way of having a top quilt. Save you a lot of money. You've probably already got the gear, just use it like that. Then if at some point later on down the road you wanted to save a little bit of weight, you wanted to get something different, then there's a lot of places you could buy the top quilts if you're ready. And I'll put some links to some good companies that make really nice, just beautiful works of art when it comes to the quilts, top quilts and under quilts and everything. I'll post a link to them at the bottom of this video. Okay, so the next piece of equipment would be the under quilt. Now if it gets down below 70 degrees, you can get cold in a hammock. You get what they call CBS, or cold butt syndrome. That air flowing underneath the hammock, like I said, if it gets down below 70, you can start getting chilly if you don't have something to protect you from that cold air. So one way to do it when you're first getting into hammock camping, if you've already got maybe an air pad or one of those blue foam pads or something that you could buy at Walmart, just use that. I've known, like, I've tried a blue foam pad. Most people that are already camping have some kind of sleeping pad if they're camping in a tent. Those blue, if you don't have anything, those blue foam pads, you can buy them at Walmart for really cheap. They're under $20. Now I found when I first slept in a hammock, it was warm enough I didn't need anything, and then I tried some pads, and especially the blue foam pads. I think it kind of takes away from the comfort of the hammock to a certain extent. And I prefer, if I'm going to use a pad, I prefer like an inflating pad, because then you can let out some of the air pressure, and it's not so stiff on you. It feels a lot more comfortable. That's what I did last night. I got this Thermarest pad I've had for 100 years, and I just let out some of the air. A nice comfortable sleep. I stayed warm, and it also provides protection from mosquitoes trying to bite you through the material. So if you're going to use one of the blue foam pads, what I would suggest is, if you're brand new to hammocks and you're getting in a hammock for the first time, do it without a pad and see how comfortable that is, and then put the pad in there, and you'll see a difference. Now what you could do if you're using one of the blue foam pads is you could see at some points in a hammock when you're sleeping at an angle, it's kind of pushing up and pushing against the material, and you're getting a lot of resistance. You could trim that excess material off of there, and that'll make it a lot more comfortable, because it's not trying to fold in over the top of you down at your feet or your shoulder, or just there's a lot of ways you could taper it down, or you could just cut. If you lay head right and foot left, you can cut some of the corner off the pad up here and some of the corner of the pad off here, or you could taper it down. You could do whatever. One thing you have to watch out for, the smaller you make that, the less wide it is, the more of a chance of your shoulders not being on it, and then your shoulders getting cold, because of the wind on your shoulders. And same thing, like this is a 3/4 length pad, so my feet aren't on it, and the colder it gets at night, the more of a chance I got of my feet getting cold and stuff like that. I used that my synthetic bag last night. That's another reason with the top quilts too. They don't have that material underneath you, because when you're compressing the material, it loses its insulation value. One thing they don't say about that is that's really the case with down, but I only use synthetic. It's just a personal thing. I do not use down, and so with that synthetic bag, with the foot box and everything, and it not being on the pad, I'm compressing that insulation, but synthetic insulation doesn't compress as much as down, which is a bad thing if you want to take up less space in your pack, but it's a good thing if you want it to keep you warm, because since it doesn't compress as much, I still have some insulation value from that, so my feet don't tend to get cold when they're hanging off the pad like that. That's another thing to think of, synthetic versus down. That's a whole argument I'm not going to get into. I've talked to somebody on a podcast about the synthetic versus down, and I've been camping for well over 40 years, and from my experiences, I think that synthetic is the way to go. We debated a little bit. He said that well, you just pack your fears, and I kind of get that, but no, I'm not packing my fears by taking a synthetic bag. I'm packing my experience. I know what works for me. So didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but that's one thing to consider. If if you're using a smaller pad, your feet are going to be off of there. And if you're using a down bag and you're compressing that insulation, your feet could end up getting cold if you're using a 3/4 length pad instead of a full length. Just something to think about. Synthetic bag, it's not much of an issue. So one thing people complain a lot about with using pads is the pad slips out from underneath them during the night, and then they wake up cold. Then they gotta either get out of their hammock and readjust the pad, or sit there and try to fidget around and get the pad adjusted back underneath them, and it's kind of a hassle. That happens more, in my experience, it happens more with like the hard foam pads like you buy at Walmart, those blue pads. That happens more with them than something like an inflatable pad, especially if you let out a little bit of air in an inflatable pad. The inflatable pad, it sticks in place a whole lot better. It conforms to you more, it conforms to the hammock more, and it tends to stay in place more than one of those blue foam pads. So that's something to consider. I think when I bought this back in the early 90s, I think I paid maybe $50 for this pad versus less than 20 for a blue foam pad. But I've had this since the 90s. It's been used all over the world, still works great. And $50 for an inflatable pad, and this is a self-inflating pad. $50 for that, $60 for it, whatever it was, versus $300 for an underquilt. I mean, it's definitely a lot more budget friendly. So one thing I would suggest, if you decide you don't want to use a pad, you try out and that's what happened with me. I tried out a pad and everything. The blue foam pad I wasn't really happy with. It just took away from the comfort too much for me. That inflatable pad, that works out pretty good, but I wanted an actual underquilt, and I didn't want to spend $300 for it. So my first underquilt I bought on Amazon. It was a Chill Gorilla underquilt, rated down to 40 degrees, and I think I paid 60 bucks for it. So you could find, especially on Amazon, you could find some underquilt for hammocks for around the $60 price range, and it's nice if you're just starting out and everything. They're usually only rated to about 40 degrees, but like I said, once it gets down below 70, you start getting cold. So keeping you warm from that 70 to 40 degree mark, that's definitely worth 60 bucks. One thing to watch out for is they have these underquilts that from the side, they're kind of shaped like a canoe. They kind of start out and then they taper up to a point, and it's like two pieces of material that are sewn up and come up to a point up top, and it's just two flat pieces of material. And then when you put it on underneath your hammock, it only opens up, you know, about that much. And that's okay if you're sleeping, you know, straight in your hammock and you're sleeping like a banana and everything, which I definitely do not suggest. That's the nice thing about these hammocks, you can lay diagonally. But if you're sleeping like that, those underquilts are not bad. But if you try to use one of them and you're laying at a diagonal, then with me laying head right and foot left, then the edge of this hammock, my shoulder and everything's going to be, I mean the underquilt, my shoulder and everything's going to be on this edge, and then my calves are going to be on this edge of the underquilt, and I'm going to feel that all night long. And then my shoulder, my head ends up not covered by the underquilt because it only opens up so much, and my feet and everything are not going to be covered by the underquilt on the other end, laying at an angle. And there's going to be this dead air space about this big between your butt and the bottom of the quilt, and it's just going to hold all kinds of cold air and everything. Those are not, I would not suggest those type of underquilts on a hammock where you're going to be sleeping at a diagonal. I would not suggest them at all. And you'll see them, different companies make them, and like I said, they start out, you know, wide, and then as they go up to the ends, they just taper down to this really little point. And you could see it from the side how it's tapered up like that too, and how it just looks like two flat pieces of material that are sewn along the seam, and they just open up kind of like an envelope. I would definitely, if you're sleeping in a cheaper, you know, Amazon hammock or something, and you're laying like a banana and everything, yeah, that'll probably work. But if you're going to sleep in one of these style hammocks and you're going to be laying in a diagonal, stay away from that. And I'll show you here my original underquilt and show you the difference. Okay, so this is my Chill Gorilla underquilt. It's rated at 40 degrees. This is the first underquilt I bought. Got it from Amazon for about 60 bucks, so it's pretty cheap. And I'll show you that here in a second. Okay, so this is, it's laid out. This is the side that goes up against the hammock, and this is the outside of it, the blue side. It's got, if you look down here, so it's got the two channels that run across down each side of it. They got elastic shock cord in it that helps suspend it above the hammock. One thing with the cheaper underquilts is it doesn't have a draw cord that runs down through here to help snug it up to the hammock, and I'll show you that when I set it up. And this, it normally, like your hammock has a carabiner, I mean your underquilt has like a carabiner or something that goes on here. You can just clip to the continuous loops. This didn't have anything, it was just cords. And I had these plastic hooks laying around, so I took these plastic hooks and put them on there, and I'll show you how I hook them on my continuous loops. This is a tangled mess. I didn't cut any of the cords or anything. I just was trying to set it up, you know, got it adjusted right and everything, and was going to use it a few times to make sure everything was right before I cut off all the excess cord. But I only used it a few times, and then I built myself an underquilt, so I don't use it anymore. The underquilt that I was talking about from Amazon and other places that I would stay away from, it kind of looks kind of like this, but this is tapered up to a point up here like that, and then it's sewn right along the bottom through here, and so it's just like two halves of material, and it just opens up, and it's all tapered up to a point right here. You'll see in the picture that that's what it looks like. I would definitely stay away from them, because that's one I was talking about earlier, where if you're laying straight in your hammock like a banana, they might work okay, but to lay diagonally like these, they just do not work at all. So I'll get this hung up, and then I'll show you a little bit about adjusting the underquilts. Okay, so I got it hooked up on the other side, I just took those plastic hooks and hooked them up to the continuous loops and got it draped underneath the hammock, and you just bring up this side. I've got my sleeping bag and stuff in the hammock now to kind of weight it down because of the wind, so it's not blowing around, but also to kind of show you how it fits. Okay, so that's how it would fit on your hammock. And then if this is too loose or whatever, it's flopping around too much, then you can tighten up the cords on there to make it tighter. And one thing that you have to worry about with an underquilt at night, and I'm saying this kind of stuff because it might help you if you're new to it. It can kind of give you something to, like if you're looking for one, what kind of questions to ask for, what kind of features to look for, all that kind of stuff. So one problem with an underquilt is it can kind of, throughout the night as you're moving around, it can kind of slip around and get to the point that this slides out from underneath you. Of course now it's not going to do it. Yeah. So now you wake up cold and your underquilt's hanging up here in the air. So one reason I point that out, like if you're going to get a zippered bug net, a lot of people, if they're trying to save weight, they'll only get a zipper on one side. Well, if you do that and you've only got a zipper like on the other side and this side doesn't have a zipper, now if you want to try to reach out and grab your underquilt to pull it back up, get it all right again, you can't do that because there's no zipper on this side. So so you would have to get out of the hammock and get the underquilt resituated and then get back in the hammock again. So that's just something to think about when you're looking at different hammocks and stuff. You know, saving weight is great, but to have to mess with that. Sometimes I sleep with this underquilt or with my underquilt, I can sleep through the night and never have an issue with that. But sometimes I've had it happen like twice in one night. So it's something to think about, you know, because if you got a zipper on both sides, no matter which way it flops to, you can just unzip it and reach out and just pull it back up and get it situated again. And then plus also when you first get in your hammock, you can reach out on both sides and kind of get the underquilt situated where you need it, and then zip up your hammock again, or your bug net again. One thing that helps to prevent that from happening is you get a hammock with these underquilt hooks, and I'll show you a close-up version of them. Then you can, that will help hold it up. So let me show you a closer version of that. Okay, so I got these underquilt hooks. Right here is one, and here is another one. Some hammocks you get, they'll only have one underquilt hook, you know, one on this side and that side of the head end, and one on, same thing on the foot end. Our hammocks, we usually build them with two underquilt hooks, two on both sides of the head and two on both sides of the foot. And the reason for that is, like, if you were trying to clip this underquilt hook right here where the material is, it won't clip in there right, or you take a chance on damaging that, putting a hole in that material trying to get it to do right. And that's because this is a full-length underquilt, and these bottom ones are for, like, if you have a 3/4 length underquilt. People use 3/4 length underquilts just to save weight. They're smaller, but your feet tend to hang off of them and everything, and then so a lot of people will carry like a piece of Reflectix or something to put underneath their feet and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a hassle. I would rather just carry the extra weight of a full-length underquilt than not have to worry about it. But anyway, so these are for a 3/4 and these are for a full length. And now the full length, I could take just the shot cord and I can clip it in to the quilt hook, and that holds it in place. And then now you do that on both sides of the head and both sides of the foot, and it's less likely to turn and slide out from underneath you and it just end up on one side. It helps to really hold it up in place. But if you get a hammock that's only got one set of underquilt hooks, it might end up being where your material is on your quilt, and then you can't really use the underquilt hook. That's why we always use two of them. You could get by with just one, like this one for the full length underquilt. Even if you had a 3/4 length underquilt, that would work too. But if I was going to have a 3/4 length underquilt, I want the quilt hook to be as close to the quilt as possible. It just helps hold it better. And I'll show you about this drawstring here. Okay, now like I said before, on some of the better underquilt hooks, underquilts, they have a drawstring that runs right along the edge of this material here. And see these gaps in here? These gaps can really kind of let the air flow down, get between you and the quilt, and not keep you warm. So having that drawstring here, you could draw that up and get it tighter so it blocks out those air seals. Those underquilts tend to cost more. That's just something you can kind of take into consideration when you're looking for an underquilt. It's a really nice feature. This particular one, it tends to work. By the time I put my head in here, it's kind of putting pressure on that and kind of seals it up. But it definitely works better if you have that draw cord. You're going to pay a lot more money for it, so you'll have to decide if it's worth it for you or not. And then when you first get this set up, it's hard to get, like I've got these draw cords are different lengths and everything, and the best way, and really about the only way to really set it up properly, is if you get in the hammock, get all situated, lay in at an angle and get comfortable, and then have somebody else make the adjustments on it. Because your head, like I lay head right, so my head's going to be up here and my foot's going to be down at the other end. So in a lot of cases you need to draw this side up tighter and then the foot side on the other side up tighter, so you're kind of making the hammock, the underquilt lay at an angle just like you are, so it fits better. And when you're adjusting it, you don't want too much tension, because throughout the whole hammock and everything, throughout the underquilt and up here, if you got too much tension, it's going to compress the insulation. The more you compress the insulation, the less it works, especially with down. Synthetic is not such an issue, but down, you definitely don't want to compress it. You want it hanging, you want the underquilt kind of touching you, but not pushing up against you. So when you go to adjust it, kind of explain to somebody what you want, how you want it adjusted, what they're going to have to do, and then have you lay in it and then they adjust it. And one suggestion, if the person that's adjusting it for you doesn't have any experience or whatever, what I would say is when they think they got it right, I would have them take pictures of it, from like this end and maybe the side and stuff. And then when you get out of the hammock, you can, or while you're still in there, you can look at the pictures and see how it's setting, and then have them make some more adjustments to get it right. That's just a suggestion. It works out pretty decently, actually. And I'm going to show you one feature on our hammocks that the other hammocks don't have for the underquilts. Okay, before I show you that, I just want to show you these. These are the little hooks. I got too much tension. I'm holding the camera and everything in there right now, so I can't move it. But these hooks for these shock cords, I just run up and clip them right here. And you could use, a lot of the underquilts have just a little carabiner like this. They work out really great. You just pull your hammock up there, clip the carabiners on this end, and then pull it underneath there and clip up the other end like I did earlier. But this just happens to have these plastic hooks. Real simple, easy to hook these underquilts up. Just hook up the one end of the suspension on this end, bring the underquilt underneath the hammock, and hook up the other end. and then climb in the hammock and kind of reach out on both sides and get it adjusted, get it centered. Okay, so I talked about like how this underneath here, you can get those air gaps and stuff in there, and without a drawstring like this, and also with the drawstring, if you don't have them adjusted right, it could still get some drafts in there, and sometimes you just can't seem to get it right. Well, see how this shot cord is hanging right in through here? So on our hammocks, on the Grizzlies, we've started making what we call the Ursa system. We try to get everything to kind of follow along the lines of bears, like this is a grizzly hammock. So Ursa is a Latin word for bear, and we say that Ursa stands for under quilt retention and stuff attachment. So if you need a little bit more lift on your underquilt, you can take this little carabiner that's here, and then run the even with the line, even with the underquilts, if you need a little bit more lift, you can take this and clip it up into here, and that kind of helps lift up this end. And it makes quite a bit of difference. And now this was my prototype. This is the first one of these that I made, and since then, because it didn't lift it up as high as I wanted it to, I now make this where it's 3 inches higher up here, so it does give it a lot of lift. And just the difference, especially where it's at underneath here, where you got some air gaps and stuff underneath here, just the difference in a couple inches going from here to here, that extra tension a lot of times is all you need. And if you really needed some extra tension, you could take this line and then cross it over and hook it up to the carabiner on that side, and you could take the line from this other side and cross it over and hook it to the carabiner on this side, and that really gives you a lot of lift. So with underquilts and stuff, when it comes to your hammock, that's some things to look for. Do you have any quilt hooks on your hammock? If you're looking at buying a new one, do you have any quilt hooks on your hammock? If you do you just have one, or do you have two? That can make a difference. And then with our hammocks, with our Grizzly, we make the this Ursa system that gives you a little bit more, because you could have the best rated underquilt, but if you got airflow under here between you and the hammock, yeah, you're gonna get chilly. So being able to use the quilt hooks, or like this Ursa system or something, they really make a difference. So that's what I got about top quilts and underquilts, and I hope this helps. Like I said, when you're first looking at getting into hammocks, it can be really discouraging with the prices. If you start looking at, well, I gotta get a hammock, then I gotta get a top cover, then I gotta get an underquilt, and and a lot of people see all that, and they just give up, they don't even try. But there are options. You could use a cheap sleeping pad, instead of an underquilt. If you decide to go with an underquilt, you can use something, for 60 bucks versus 300. Your top quilt, instead of buying, spending $120 to $300 for a top quilt, you could use the sleeping bag that you probably already have. So there are a lot of other options. As far as cheap underquilts, like I said, I paid about $60 for this. I got it on Amazon. It's from a company called Chill Gorilla. Up until recently, I would have absolutely suggested them. We have one of their tarps too. Paid about $60 for the tarp, which again, you can spend over $300 for a tarp if you wanted to. And we had an issue with the tarp, and the customer service with Chill Gorilla was really great. I mean, they addressed the problem really fast, and we were really happy with it. And so up until recently, I would have suggested, if you're looking for a cheap underquilt, to get a Chill Gorilla, or tarp. But I think they went out of business, because I've chatted back and forth with them over the years on Instagram and stuff like that, and I noticed recently they haven't made a post on Instagram or any social media since about November, and I've sent them a message, and they've always really responded quickly to the messages. I sent them a message a couple weeks ago, and I still haven't heard anything. And then if you go to their website, it just says, it has a message that we'll be back shortly or something like that. So I think Chill Gorilla, even though some of their products are still out there on Amazon, I think they might have went out of business. So it's something to take into consideration, because yeah, you can still buy their products and they're cheap and they work, but if you do have any issues, there might not be any customer service. They might be out of business. So that's just something you'll have to consider, and when looking at it. Yeah, like I said, I hope this helped. I like to see people get into hammocks, especially people like myself. I got a lot of problems with my neck. My wife's had a lot of back surgeries. We got to the point where we just couldn't camp anymore, and then we found out about hammocks, and both of us able to sleep in them really comfortably. But so now we're able to get back out there. But it would have been, if we couldn't have found cheaper ways to get started in it, we probably would have never tried it. So that's why I want to try to get some information out there about some budget-friendly options for people that are just starting. And then later, over time, if you want to upgrade your material, you know, better underquilts, actual top cover, all that kind of stuff, you could do that. But at least you won't be spending $1,000 just to get started. And be careful when you watch YouTube videos. These people that have very little experience, they watch YouTube, that have YouTube channels. They watch other people that have YouTube channels, and they end up buying the same gear, the YouTube kit, whether it's tents or hammocks or whatever. You know, they all, if you watch them, they all have the same exact gear, because it's what the cool kids have and all that kind of stuff. And you can easily, whether it's tents or hammocks or stuff, you can easily spend $1,000 just to get started, if not more. So be careful about that while looking around on YouTube. And you'll see, if you go on YouTube to research different items for hammock setup, you'll see the common thing, man. They've all got the same stuff, just like tents. They've all got the same tents, you know. Take everything with a grain of salt, you know. Apply some common sense. If you've been into camping, you kind of know what kind of gear works and what doesn't work, what you want out of your gear, all that kind of stuff. So look at the YouTube videos, and mine included. Look at the YouTube videos, see what they have to say, take it with a grain of salt, take what you know from your personal experience, and kind of figure out a happy medium in between. But yeah, that's it. I hope this helps somebody, and I hope you can get out there and I don't, wherever you buy that hammock or whatever, if you already got one or if you buy one from many of the other vendors out there, just as long as you're getting out there using your stuff and enjoying life, you know. It's a beautiful day, man. I'd rather be out here than sitting on the couch, you know, not doing nothing. So, and I am trying to encourage other people to do it. Hopefully, with giving you some options for budget gears, it allows you to do that. So, all right, thanks.